Welcome, um, welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 469. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me, Gail from nyfights.com. What's going on, Gail?
Hey, it's another boxing week. We don't have too many big name fights this weekend, but we got one that you need to set your alarm for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I got to get up bright and early to cover that bout. Um,
Everybody listening, if you're on the East Coast when we're done, get the hell to bed so you can get up and watch.
um, what she's referring to, and we'll get to this in a few. Brian Norman defending the WBO 147 pound belt over in Japan against number one contender Sasaki. That fight is going to air live on ESPN Plus. So yeah, this is just a few short hours before this fight as of this live recording. So I hope to get on and head straight to bed. So and Daniel from Four Boxing News in the Inscribable, he will be on hopefully later on in the show for those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show, um, podcast, talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed here. If you wish to email us questions, comments, suggestions, you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. If you check the description here, you can check out, you can see what a flying pound for pound boxing report all over various social media platforms. Link to the on Twitter because I refuse to call it X. On Facebook, link to the YouTube channel, Tumblr, as well as IG. If you wish to donate, let donation be the best nation. Got cash me a PayPal donation. I prefer to you that you use PayPal if you wish to donate. Wouldn't matter if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever you want to spare. It'll help the overall production behind the scenes. The reason I say PayPal because Cash Me at the end of 24 changed their policy in terms of how much you can contribute, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I prefer if you wish to contribute, donate, please use the PayPal option. Let's get things going this evening, Gail, and let's head off to NYC. To be specific, a doubleheader on the Zone. The headliner was Richardson Hitchins making the first defense of the IBF 140 pound strap against George Kambosos, former unified champion at 135. When we talked about this bout last week, we both basically agreed that going in, Hitchins is the taller guy, he's the bigger guy, um, and he is the overall better boxer. And that if he just stick to the basics and really not go outside of himself, um, he should win. And he did just that. Uh, if you want a perfect script on how to impress what that performance was on behalf of Hitchens, ultimately, Gail, um, Hearn knew exactly what he was doing, putting Hitchens in there with Kambosos, a guy who's a name guy, who has a name, but was there to make Hitchens look good. He basically set Hitchens up to shine, and Hitchens stepped up to the plate. He did that, dominated from opening bell, hurt him in round three with a left hook to the body, finished him off in round eight with a left hook to the body. Uh, no flaws here as far as I'm concerned.
No, Hitchens obviously got the memo, which was if you think you're going to get big name fights, big name money, and get Matchroom to renew your contract or anybody else to pick it up, you have to do more than just win. You've got to entertain. Now, fortunately for him, you're right, styles make fights. This is what smart promoters and their matchmakers do. And as fans, especially knowledgeable fans, kind of, hardcore that are listening here, we get it. We understand what this is all about. But it doesn't mean that it can't be thoroughly entertaining and a showcase for a fighter with real skills to showcase those skills. And he was putting them on display like a masterpiece for all of us to enjoy. I dare say that Hitchins might have one of the best jabs in boxing right now. It's that same kind of jab that has the snap at the end when the arm has full extension, the kind of jab that Dmitry Bivol uses along with his footwork. I'm not sure that Hitchins has quite the same footwork and finesse of Bivol, but he sure as hell has got that snapping jab. And if you just think a jab is a boring setup punch, I invite you to go back, fast forward the fight on YouTube to about the third or fourth round, and look how messed up Kambosos Jr.'s face is, essentially from nothing much more than a jab. But what it does do, just like the approach of using body shots to soften somebody up, that jab softens up somebody like Kambosos. And Kambosos wants to fight in no man's land. He doesn't stand far enough outside because he doesn't have the speed to come in and come out. And he's not right up on top of his opponent where he could smother those jabs and get in on him. And I dare say, maybe he thinks he's close enough that he's going to get tagged with power punches. But honest to God, what's the difference if you're picked to death, nibble by nibble, eaten to death by ducks by those jabs? I mean, you might as well crowd on in, give it your best and, go out in a blaze of glory. But to his credit, first of all, Kambosos keeps getting fights because he knows how to sell a fight. And man, did he sell that fight last week. He had a lot of people believing he had a shot at this. And he makes it fun. He does give it his all. You can't help but like him. And then he gets into the ring. He's the perfect style opponent. He doesn't whine about it after the fact. In fact, what I found utterly charming, despite the fact he got a complete beat down, as he says, well, now I'm 2-1 in New York. He still has the winning record in New York. Somebody with that kind of attitude, good for him. He has parlayed one magical night when he beat Teofimo Lopez into a big payday and an extension of his career. Now, if he's smart, he'll take a little time off. He'll go back home to Australia. He'll get himself on a card, maybe, headlined by one of the other bigger names there at home. Next Jayo Pataya card, or if Tim Tszyu goes back, or, who knows who could be back there headlining fight. For all we know, Tara Moana could headline a regional card at this point. Get himself on the card, get himself a domestic opponent that gives him a win, call it a career, count your money, enjoy your family.
Absolutely. For Kambosos, to your point, I will go further and say that maybe have 1-2 more fights in his home country, of Australia, and decide to call it a day. Right? He got that win against Teofimo back 4 or 5 years ago now, and he kind of parlayed that into not just a bigger additional big fights, but he's made himself a good chunk of change in the interim. He has said after the fight that he's saved his money well, essentially suggesting that he doesn't really need to fight anymore. He's going to sit back and contemplate things, and just do that, and maybe have a swan song in Australia, and decides to hang it up the gloves. He's done good for himself. No shame in his career, and he's fought just about everybody in that one, particularly when he was at 135 pounds, right? In terms of Hitchins, the future for him now, after the fight in the ring with the Zone, he made some comments that, to my eye, to me at least, had me scratching my head a bit. One, calling out Devin Haney, and two, there were some comments made by him about Matchroom that, let's just say, got under the skin of one Eddie Hearn. Now, during the secondary news conference, there was talk of Hitchins possibly facing Teofimo Lopez, who also has a belt at 140 pounds. Those two fighters have had their verbal spats throughout the year, right? And coincidentally, ironically, I should say, they're both managed by the same guy. I don't get it, but I don't understand why Hitchins is calling for Haney, who's still in recovery mode from what happened to him April last year, right? Um, for me, Gail, Teofimo is the obvious fight. Unification, um, beef between the two, quote unquote. Uh, Arguably, right now, is the best fight at 140 pounds. You're on mute,
Yeah,
Gail.
yep, thank you. I agree. I think the only reason that there was the rather profane clapback on the air at Haney is Bill Haney was sitting in the audience catcalling and hazing Hitchins the whole fight during the whole post-fight remarks in the ring. So yeah, I think it was as much about that as anything. But yeah, a Haney fight against Hitchins, that's not a big ticket seller. The truth is they didn't sell out the theater at Madison Square Garden either for this fight, which is a shame. It was entertaining. It was a good card. Um, but a fight between Hitchens and Lopez for bragging rights in New York, two New Yorkers, dusting it up. Again, Hitchens has somebody in Lopez who can help sell the fight. Lopez is coming off that win, the only decent win on that god awful card in May in Times Square. So let's get a real New York fight going. All right. New York Fights thoroughly endorses a all New York 140-pound matchup for bragging rights between Richardson, Hitchens, and Teofimo Lopez. It's schedule it later in the fall. A great time to do it. Pick an open weekend. I mean, there's just nothing not to like about it. It, I don't think would be a wildly expensive fight. Focus maybe on making it an all New York talent or at least all New York A side fights. Even put some regional guys on there. Call up Joe DeGuardia and get some of his folks in there. And I think that you would certainly sell out the theater as a venue. Is it big enough for the full garden? That might be a stretch, but it's a good fight for both those guys. And I think it'd be a hell of a lot of fun in the lead up.
And who does Teofimo have lined up right now other than no one? Really, he tried to goad Terrence Crawford in a fight
Yeah,
in a
right.
way which I found
That ain't
insulting.
happening.
Tried to goad Boots Ennis into a fight. That ain't happening, and we'll talk about that
Yeah, that's not
in
happening.
a few. Right? And so, yeah, I agree with you. Quickly before we move on to talk about the undercard and Andy Cruz, what did you think about the comments that he had towards Matt's rooms? And I don't know if you heard Hearn's response, but
Yeah.
talking to ringside guys, he was like, okay, the problem with Hitchens is that he got, paraphrasing him, some snakes in his camp that's giving him some wrong advice.
Well, I think it was the heat of the moment, being asked about where he goes from that fight, the minute that final bell rings, you're thinking forward, right? And, those guys have just come off a fight, emotions are high, he'd hollered at Bill Haney and he makes this unfortunate comment in the heat of a great win that, oh yeah, now I'm a free agent. Admittedly, after he had thanked Eddie in Matchroom for taking him on and, building him and promoting him and supporting him in the last two fights, which has brought him to this point. I'm not sure he really meant it how it sounded and clearly how Hearn took it because it was kind of a slap across the chops, right? My understanding is, they've made amends outside the ring, but I'll forgive a guy sometimes for making those sort of comments in that post-fight interview in the ring. I'm not the biggest fan of those interviews. That kind of question needs to be asked at the post-fight news conference. But, still, you need to learn, and fighters should learn, mostly learn, not always, that what you say in the ring after a fight is, going to be heard by a lot of people and scrutinized, and you need to be able to control what you're saying. The only one that controls what comes out of your mouth is you.
Exactly. Daniel has joined us from Daniel from For Boxing News in the Inscribable. We're talking about Richardson Hitchins, his stoppage win over George Kambosos. Daniel, quick word on that fight in terms of excuse me, as well as the future for specifically Hitchins. Should the effort be made straight away for a unification bout with Teofimo?
When it comes to the fight, Kambosos kind of reminds me of a bit of Robert Guerrero, where he had solid wins and earned himself a spot, earned himself some accolades, beating Teofimo the way he did. But unfortunately, it was a situation where he was facing a guy in Hitchins that was more disciplined, had a faster jab, was a lot more accurate. And outside of a brief 20 seconds in the 6th round, did not let his guard down when it came to Kambosos' punches. Hitchins' jab was as effective as you can be, but the body work. I've been an advocate always when it comes to body shots in boxing. The body work is what ultimately undid Kambosos. That punch in the 8th round, you could tell, even if Kambosos got up 2 seconds faster than what he did, it was not going to make any more leeway for Kambosos. He has had a good career, and he has had some great notable wins, but he's reached a point where you simply cannot beat the top echelon fighters or prospects at this point. When it comes to Hitchins, on the other hand, I would probably say why not? Why not try to make the unification with Teofimo? Because the bad thing about Teofimo Lopez is we don't know which Teofimo Lopez is going to show up on fight night. Maybe the Teofimo Lopez that beat Lomachenko and Kelly show up. The guy that can put on a masterclass as far as defense, athleticism, and accuracy. Or you had the fighter that shows up against Kambosos, who thinks that alone will carry him to victory against a fighter that looks to be a lot more disciplined and more ready to deal with that type of fight style than what Teofimo and his camp were prepared for. I would say do it. Do it. Make sure that you can get as much as you can out of it, because whatever party is involved on Teofimo's side, you know that they're probably one fight or two. This may be the fight where they may be looking to cash out.
Indeed. On the undercard, and I'll go back to you on this one, Daniel. You can follow up. Gail, you had Andy Cruz fighting Mishiro in an IBF 135 pound eliminator, right? We've talked about Andy Cruz extensively on this podcast. And for me, when it comes to the contenders and the lightweight division, I think Cruz ranks above them all, right? Dare I say, given the landscape of the division, Andy Cruz is a world champion in waiting, and he that position on my part stays after this performance. This was a cakewalk. He played with Mishiro in parts before, just battering him and beating him up. Now, with the win, Cruz becomes number one contender for uh, newly crowned IBF champion Raymond Muratalla, who we talked about on the last episode. Uh, as it stands right now, if you had to pick between a fight between Muratalla and Cruz, who would it be?
Oh, this may be recency bias, but I would probably lean towards Cruz because, well, let's throw some caveats first. This fight against Mishiro, it was target practice for him, mainly because Mishiro just wasn't able to make any adjustments, and his body was so stiff. His upper body was so stiff that he couldn't avoid the punches. And like I said, it became target practice for Andy Cruz. And what makes him a little bit different than, like I said, a lot of the fighters that you see that wait a good while for the amateurs coming in is he knows he has power and he knows when to switch from let me try to just win the points to I'm just going to take this guy out, which is what he did against Mishiro. And when you have somebody like that, even though Muratalla is a very good fighter, I would probably tip my hat more towards Cruz because he's a lot more focused. He knows he has a goal. And he also knows that he's not in the position where he can wait a long while to really turn it on. And now he's in the prime position to get that world title. It'll be a really, really good fight, but I would expect him to win.
Last week, Gil, we talked a lot about Keyshawn Davis and the mess that he made of himself, right? With the cancel bout against De Los Santos. And we also talked about Abdullah Mason. And within that, Muratalla's name was mentioned. At the very least, Cruz deserves to be right in that mix. We know the history between Cruz and Davis going back to their amateur days. We made a comparison between Mason and Muratalla. Muratalla was recently upgraded to world champion, full-time champion. I don't know. I'll leave it up to the people to decide who would win a fight between Cruz and Muratalla. I have my thoughts on that. At the very least, I want to see it. I think Muratalla gets slept on. We know the talent of Cruz going back to his amateur, highly successful amateur career. He's made it look easy so far in the pros. It should happen. It probably will happen. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I think he definitely deserves that shot. It's not going to be the biggest ticket seller, if it's a co-main support championship fight.
A hardcore fight fans
but
fight.
The hardcore will love it. And I'm going to get to you, Michael, one of these days. Muratalla, and Muratalla.
My apologies, Muratalla. You're absolutely right. Muratalla.
Yeah, he's a champion now, so we better get it right, or we're going to be in trouble here on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Muratalla is a sneaky good fighter. He just goes about his business with so little fuss. He just, he puts the hard hat on, gathers up his lunch pail, and goes to work. And he doesn't care if it's particularly flashy. He's willing to mix it up if necessary. If it's not necessary, he just ensures he's going to get the win. He's one of these quietly driven guys out of the massive array of aspiring talent that comes out of Southern California, and in particular, the Inland Empire, that very sort of non-glamorous part of Southern California where it's hot as hell. It's just about the same heat most of the summer as Las Vegas is. There's nothing there. It's, just desert and rough mountains and, Amazon warehouses these days. But it's also home to some of the best gyms and facilities in boxing. And you know what? What the hell else is there to do out there, right? And it is a heavily Mexican American population. I mean, it is just a breeding ground. Pour a little bit of water and plant food on it, and you get these guys emerging as champions. And, guys like Arnold Barboza, who's actually out of LA, but still out of that culture. And they all seem to come out of nowhere. They just line up behind each other, one after another. And the ones that get their shot, if they get their mind right, if they have the work ethic and they can keep at it and convert, then you get a Murataya, then you get an Arnold Barboza Jr. And yeah, I'd love to see Cruz and Murataya. That puts a belt in play. That makes it a more interesting fight also down the road between Cruz and Davis. And that's the crown jewel down the road. But right now they're in two different weight divisions. Andy Cruz doesn't need to be in a huge hurry to move up. However, because he's had a long amateur career, he can't linger there forever. So I'm not sure he will stick around, looking into the future. I don't think he'll stick around forever to try to unify. I think he'll gather a belt or two maybe and then move up. And you heard him after his fight, a very good-natured but very pointed taunt. He's calling himself Keyshawn Davis's daddy, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, son, I'm watching you." I like that good-natured rivalry. And Top Rank is not afraid to put their guys against each other, and they'll do it.
You're right, Gail. It's not a question of if, it's when. It should happen. Given Top Rank situation, they're already spreading their fighters out to fighting on other platforms now with their relationship with ESPN ending very, very soon. I think their contract expires next month, I believe. So yeah,
August. In August.
August.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought it was July, but it's August, my bad. But yet and still, the fact that Teofimo is fought on the zone, and you have other fighters within their stable fighting on other platforms, do not be surprised if we see the fight between Murataya and Cruz ending up on the zone. And again, I'm highly anticipating that bout. I think it's going to be a very, very good bout. Let's move on to some quick news here because it's going to be a very, very shortened episode because, again, I got to get up early to cover this fight in Japan tomorrow, right? Mentioned Eddie Hearn when talking about Hitchins. Gail, he announced that Anthony Joshua, his career is coming to an end. In an interview, he's stated that AJ only has 2 more fights in him, and then he's calling it a day. To me, given how Joshua looked in that bout with Dubois, where he got knocked out and he got basically bounced around the ring throughout that contest, right move here on the part of Team AJ. He's done enough.
Yeah. We've seen the writing on the wall for this long before the Dubois fight. His last few fights have been, at his demeanor, have been very up, very down, very up, very down. I mean, it seems like there's sort of no middle ground. There was that hope that there would be a Fury fight. Fury and Sugar Hill Stewart kind of teased everyone on social media and then backed way back again. Who the hell knows what's going on with him? I don't think Wilder's or Joshua's gonna wait around forever. Well, there's my tell right there. We have, in just 9 short days, the return of one Deontay Wilder in a pay-per-view fight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not recommending you watch it, but The
No
boxing
comment
world,
on that fight.
the boxing world will be watching. Should Wilder get himself a spectacular knockout, mark my words, you're going to see Joshua and Wilder, in sort of that career ending encore, go out, with a last blast. It will sell. People will be curious. It's the heavyweights. Particularly if the fight is done in London, it'll sell like crazy. And both these guys get one more huge payday, one more moment of glory. And God hopes that after that they would both walk away. But, Dillian White's still fighting. So what can I say?
That part. Your thoughts on this, Daniel?
It's both smart and sad a little bit at the same time. It's smart to know that, okay, you don't want to drag your career past a certain point. You want to have your health in a relatively good place. Plus, like I said, Joshua is not exactly a bad looking guy. If he stops boxing, he's not exactly going to be losing income. There's probably at least 2 or 3 modeling contracts waiting for him, or sponsorship deals waiting for him as soon as he retires. So financially, that's not an issue. It's sad, though, on the other hand, is number one, like I mentioned, we never got the Wilder fight when both were close to what you would consider their prime. Because that would have been a fight where you could say Joshua should win because he's more technically sound, but as was been proven with Joshua, unfortunately, various times, he can't be hit and he can't be dropped. And at that time, Wilder had the best sleeper in the sport. But it's good for him to come out when it's not too late. You don't want to be in the position where you become a Derek Chisora or what Dillian White's becoming now. Basically, a gatekeeper, somebody that you come in, people are happy to see you, but there's no point in you fighting. There just isn't at this stage. And better to leave the ring with your head mostly intact than leave the ring when people said that you maybe should have retired 5 or 6 fights ago.
I have nothing to add other than my earlier statements. If Hearn is on the up, if they stick to the word Hearn specifically, as well as the insiders within Joshua camp, this is right timing for him. 2-time unified champion. He fought just about everybody. Has made a whole lot of money and will presumably make a whole lot of money once he decides to hang up the gloves. Just like with Kambosos, in my opinion, has no more to prove. Even more to the point, Anthony Joshua, he has no more to prove. He's in his mid-30s now, and he's a fighter who's clearly on the decline. Get out now before you get really, really seriously injured, in my opinion. And going back to you, Gail, I guess you can call this the worst kept secret in boxing. We're talking about Jerron Boots Ennis, who announced that he's moving up to 154. He needs something because in a year where boxing has been pretty mid, you've heard relatively nothing from Boots. Yes, in his last fight, he became a unified champion at 147, but the real smoke, the real big names are at 154 pounds. It was known throughout these boxing streets that 147 wasn't the easiest weight for Boots to make. With Crawford moving up, and is now moved up to fight Canelo, he's not going to get that fight anytime soon, but there's still some viable names at junior middleweight. This was easy. This was, again, not worst kept secret, but yeah, this decision on the part of Boots Ennis, Gail, was inevitable.
We've all seen him just barely making weight. He did seem to make an extra effort in his last fight. He needed a good performance. But even with a nutritionist, even with absolutely the perfect preparation plan and all the help and discipline, you can only, it's like trying to stuff a suitcase. I mean, at some point, it's just not going to be able to do anything else. And it impedes your performance. We want to see Juan Ennis at his very best. He has teased those elite skills for so long, and we feel he's capable of it. I was going to say we know he's capable of it. We don't really know. We need to see him at a comfortable weight with all of his tools maximized, with his ring IQ not being eaten up, worrying about making weight. He needs to have a camp that's not a fat camp, which I'm sure it was not quite that dire. If you've got a good nutritionist, that's half the battle. Not a lot of fighters do well psychologically under that sort of regimen, in addition to having to work that hard in the gym, bearing down on your diet. So let's see what he can do now that he's moved up. He is moving to a division, though, with some serious talent and some stone cold killers. So it's going to be exciting to watch him tangle with some of those guys. And I'm looking forward to it. I hope the money is good. I hope a lot of them say yes. And thankfully, at least currently at super welterweight, we have a lot of guys willing to take on the other challengers and top contenders. They're saying yes to these fights, and I love it.
Yeah, with Fundora, with Bud technically still in the division, he may move back down after the Canelo fight. With Murtazaliev, with Lubin, with Xander Zayas, Tim Tszyu is still around. Jesus Ramos is still around. Keith Thurman is officially at 154 now. There are
Virgil
names. There are
Ortiz, everybody.
Virgil Ortiz. Virgil Ortiz. Oh, I thought I said him, but I guess I
Yeah,
did. Virgil
Surrey
Ortiz.
Rosa, for that matter, is a handful
Yeah,
for
but
everybody, right?
right.
So,
So there are names um in that division. There are fights there for Ennis. Um he can finally get some spotlight and some showcase fights because
yeah.
at 147, let's admit it now, it was basically nothing there and got to a point where he was just wasting his time. We will see what Hearn decides to do with him. But again, in case for those who have been sleeping under a rock, Jerron Booth and it's officially announced that he's moving up to 154 pounds. Let's get to some of these fights here. Not many fights on the docket. I want to focus on one. I've been talking about this. The fight's going to happen tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time, around roughly 7 a.m. ish in Japan, with Brian Norman, who has the WBO belt at 147. Gail, fighting Jin Sasaki. Sasaki is his number one contender, and I like this fight. Two young guys, 24 and 23 respectively. Sasaki has been talking up the fact that he believes that he can beat anybody at 147 pounds. He gets his shot. They get Norman to come over to his home country. Uh, Norman, in his last few outings, the fight that he got to win the belt, first title defense, right? He's looked very well. His first title defense, he looked very, very good. In the fight before that, he looked very good as well. He seems to be someone who has the potential. What's the saying? Once you win a title, you get 25% better. I think he has that is in him. He's hungry. He's determined. His skill set is very, very solid, very disrespected. People don't pay enough attention to his skill, right? Just like they didn't pay enough attention to the skill of Lamont Roach heading into the fight against Tank Davis earlier this year. And on paper, on video, when I studied these two guys, I believe that Norman is the better fighter. But there's the added factor of fighting in someone's home country. And you know that Sasaki is going to be boosted when fighting in front of his essentially home crowd. Your thoughts on what's going to happen tomorrow morning in Japan?
Yeah, I think that we all acknowledge that Norman is the favorite. Norman's on quite a roll. He has been proving people wrong, who said, "Yeah, don't think he's got quite the resume. Yeah, I'm not sure he's got quite the skills." And he he has blown by the doubters every time. And Sasaki's had a little bit of that too. And let's remember, he's a real anomaly in Japan, where its greatest talents are in the very small weight divisions. A welterweight talent in Japan at this level, you know, they're very unusual. They're not quite the unicorns that you have when you see a middleweight or a super middleweight from Japan, but a welterweight's still, not the norm. He's very flashy. He's very fan friendly. He sells tickets. So this was a no brainer. Now I was under the impression he was the number 2 ranked challenger and the one available. And smart of Norman, right? Tests himself against Sasaki, and you know he's away from the prying eyes and the critical eyes that he is sometimes subject to in the United States. He, as he has said several times, which I really like, I put the world in world champion. He's taking a road fight. He will get more money for it. He's going to be in front of a big crowd. And once again, he could prove something. He has got that chip on his shoulder that really drives certain fighters. For a long time, Bud Crawford had the same chip on his shoulder. Hey, just something to prove and a little bit ticked off that he's got to do it, but God damn it, he's going to do it. And I like it. I think it is a really valuable tool in a boxer's psychological makeup. So while they've been mostly respectful, I mean, this is Japan after all. They had a little spice at the weigh-in. Sasaki kind of leaned in and got a little bit in Norman's face. It was all well done. So I think it's going to be very entertaining. I don't think it'll be a complete blowout. Sasaki is a live dog, but I still think Norman is going to win this.
You're correct, Gail. Sasaki is ranked number 2 by the WBO, not number 1. And to your point about the weigh-in, the Japanese fighter, he's a cocky little SOB, but you don't mind that. You don't mind that in a fighter, right? Self-belief. But you mentioned, and I'll go to you, Daniel. You mentioned, Gail, that Sasaki is friendly. The part of that other side of that, Daniel, is that friendly, but he's susceptible to being hit. He leaves himself open, and that's the difference in between him and when I and that's could very well get him in trouble against a Norman who not only has an edge to him, right? Always has something to prove, that proverbial chip on his shoulder. He is someone who is very fundamentally sound, right? He's one of those guys he's one of those all-around fighters who does everything when it comes to the basics well, even if he doesn't have that one standout attribute. And that means that he's solid, and that means he's consistent. And that consistency, I think, will carry him through in this upcoming fight.
It should, because Norman in many ways reminds me, like you've made a description, of Danny Garcia, a fighter that doesn't do one thing great, but he does everything well. And sometimes that's all you need. You don't need the standout factor if your overall skill set is that well rounded, which Norman's it is. Sasaki is going to be, to me, probably an interesting opponent because we know there's been a lot of Japanese fighters that can bang, are willing to stand side to side with you, but are also known to be much more fundamentally sound. They're more known for being guys that protect themselves a little bit more and are more technical in that sense. Unfortunately, that's Sasaki. Sasaki's willing to bang. He's willing to get hit in order to land his shots. And that's a very good fight to have. A good trait to have, actually, in a Japanese market that is looking to probably be expanded. And considering how boxing is now starting to shift, unfortunately, away from the US being a major hub, the Japanese market does need a fighter like that. Somebody that can go in there, has the confidence of, like in the press conference, he said his victory wouldn't be a coincidence. It is inevitable. That's cockiness that you normally do not see from Japanese fighters. But that's something that they need. And especially in the division that they're in, one of the glamour divisions of the sport, a weight that they don't normally inhabit. So it's a great fight into it, even though I think Norman is more well-rounded and he'll likely win the fight, but it will be an entertaining fight. I can picture it being closer than what a lot of people would think.
Okay, I'm back. Again, that fight is going to take place tomorrow in Japan on ESPN Plus. That fight they will make their ring walks roughly 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we head off, one more issue that was in the news this week. We talked about this a little bit a few weeks back. And that is Jaime Munguia, who had a recent win in the rematch. What's the person who knocked him out? One of the upsets of the year, and he got his revenge, quote unquote. Daniel Ngale.
Oh, wait, let me just find it here. Because I stepped myself away from the computer for a little bit. I have the name shortly. Let's see here.
Name is
oh crap! I'm actually surprised. I'm actually surprised it's not up here. Let me see.
Sriracha, or however you pronounce his name.
Oh, Sasaki, yeah.
Saras. Bruno Saras.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Saras. After that, in the aftermath of that rematch, quote unquote, win, he tested positive for an illegal substance. Early yesterday, I believe, news broke that the B sample came out positive for testosterone. Right?
Yep.
And yeah.
I mean,
suspension is more than likely going to happen with Munguia. What have you heard in the aftermath of this B sample?
I'll jump in. Munguia was present when the B sample was opened and analyzed. That's his right under the rules. He went through the process with the World Anti-Doping Agency lab. He said he was committed to transparency. He's aware of the results. He owns up to it. He said, "Hey, he still denied that he knowingly took this substance, and that he wants to clear everything up, and he will do so and get back in the ring." Now, the substance was exogenous origin of testosterone metabolites. Why is that specific description important? Because what it means is it's testosterone found to come from a source outside the natural testosterone produced in your body, right? It wasn't some kind of booster that boosted your own testosterone count, and there's a lot of things.
Synthetic.
Yeah. this was synthetic, right? This was something cooked up in a lab to mimic testosterone, mimic your natural testosterone. Yeah, you know what? That's about as much of a smoking gun as it gets, right? So Munguia is certainly going to be suspended, and it might be a long time because you need to bear in mind, remember, this was a Riyadh fight, and the Riyadh season cards are regulated by the British Boxing Board of Control. They do not play around when you've been popped for a banned substance. So it's likely that Munguia will get at bare minimum a year. And that's going to hurt. At this point of his career, that is going to hurt. And it will be declared a no contest, no doubt. Which means Saras is once again going to end up being an undefeated fighter. Good for him. I mean, let's see how he benefits from that. But he should certainly not carry that loss on his record. You know, it's a shame that rematch, was so tainted because we were so interested to see, how Saras would perform in the second fight after his improbable, knockout win over Munguia in 2024. So that'll put Saras back in the ring, undefeated. Certainly will get him another good opportunity. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up as the B-side to one of the folks at super middleweight, just like we've been talking about. One more player in that division. Munguia is going to end up sitting out. And it is going to revive the chatter that happened at the time the first drug test turned up positive about what the hell is going on with Eddie Reynoso's fighters all getting popped. I'm not going to start that discussion today. That is a discussion that needs to be had and will be had by a lot of folks in boxing, and how it's going to be handled remains to be seen.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That's... Say again?
no, go ahead.
Yeah, that is a dangerous set of dominoes are about to fall, unfortunately. Because, number one, you didn't have to be there for the B sample if you knew that this was happening. And B, it comes at a point of a career, and especially for a fighter's training camp, particularly I mentioned the Reynoso camp, where, there has been some awareness going on, unfortunately. For Munguia, this pretty much effectively takes him out of contention. It takes him out of contention. Doesn't matter if next year he'll try to go down to 160, or if he can't make 160 anymore, goes to 75. It doesn't matter. You are gonna be out of contention, and unfortunately, every major win that you've had, because it always happens. Almost every major win that you had is gonna be somewhat questioned, because there's always a belief is if you get caught, it doesn't mean it was the first time using it. It was just the first time you got caught. So that's unfortunately a cloud that Munguia is going to have to deal with for a good long while. And Gail mentioned it, like at a time where you just had the announcement of Canelo Crawford being in the Allegiant Stadium. You have this cloud going over it now. And let's remember, Canelo himself did pop before for clitoral. The circumstances were iffy at best, but he's already been a fighter that popped. There's going to be some conversations that's going to be had and it's gonna take, and it'll probably engulf a lot of the buildup with the fight with Crawford.
Daniel mentioned this during his discussion about McGee, about Crawford, about Canelo and Bud Crawford. Your reaction, everyone's reaction to the fight is going to the fact it's going to land at Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play.
Well, it's awfully interesting. We've gotten the official announcement. We're going to have a 3-city press tour. Dates announced starting next week. But there has been no comment from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who has a game there that night. Now, I understand the fight card is going to be during the day, by the way, Saturday, the 13th, not in the evening. But, somebody needs to move. And I have not heard any confirmation that the university has agreed to move or announced to their fans who were expecting a home game that they've moved. So, this puts an interesting spin on it. We don't know what has been discussed in the background among the parties involved. But if this was simply an announcement that, we're going to be in the stadium that day, and the deal wasn't sealed at UNLV's end, if I am the UNLV administrators, I'm thinking, okay, now we have control of these negotiations because they need this stadium, and they may know in their heart of hearts, what the heck, we're willing to move, but we're going to make it hurt. We are going to make it hurt, and we're going to make sure we get every dime back necessary to make us whole for not getting to have a home game.
And here's the thing.
Going to be a problem if that's not wrapped up yet.
And here's the thing. UNLV, the football team, coming off of what they did last year, the expectation is they're going to be good again. They may be even a preseason top 25 ranked team, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And let's just
Exactly.
just say they move into that date unbeaten, right? That gives them more incentive to be stubborn about wanting to move.
Well, they're gonna have to make that arrangement long before.
I'm talking about upping the ante.
Yeah.
Oh, asking for more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Absolutely, they're in the driver's seat. Assuming the thing is, we don't really know where those negotiations are. They already concluded, and we just haven't heard anything from the universities. And the reason there's speculation about this is that lack of discussion publicly to alert the many season ticket holders and fans there in Las Vegas about what the heck's going on. They would want to step forward right away and let them know what's going on if they knew, if a plan was locked down. The discussion surrounds the fact that hasn't happened and what that means, which very possibly means that deal isn't locked down yet. So, and unfortunately, that is fairly typical for the Riyadh promotions. Now, in theory, TKO is supposed to be the group putting this together, and Dana White certainly knows all the players there in Las Vegas at the venues and who he needs to be talking to and what sort of deal needs to be struck. But how hands-on has Dana been, really, right? To this point, doesn't seem like a lot.
Nope. Yeah,
not a lot. So is it Sella, which is the Saudi promotional company outside the General Entertainment Authority under the government? Sella is the, business venture promoter, and frequently cards and other sporting events in Saudi Arabia, the business promotional organization is Sella. So is it Sella behind this announcement with Riyadh? Does TKO know what they're doing and how's the coordination going? And I know what kind of things were going on leading up to the first Riyadh season card in Los Angeles last summer, and it was not smooth, far from it. They were building the plane as it was going down the runway in a lot of ways, and it showed. They should have learned from that. So, going to be very interesting. I assume, sometime in the near future, certainly we hope before that first news conference, which is in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, I think on the 22nd, if I recall. They need to get their shit together before then, because that's a question that needs to be asked.
Yes, it has to be. And you also have to take into account, because if TKO is actually involved, is actually running this, they might have already assumed a certain guarantee, because I think I mentioned it last week. TKO just got a cold crap load of money from the city of Las Vegas to once again host WrestleMania after they hosted it this year.
Yes, right.
And there may have been a slight understanding that, okay, we'll get Mania, and then we'll get Mania, and by the way, yeah, you wanna have the Canelo fight there too, and Allegiant Stadium might have said okay, but they never made the proper channels in that area, and unfortunately, TKO has been, as far as an actual boxing promoter, has not exactly been a good one.
Now, here's an interesting twist. I'm a reader of the Las Vegas Review Journal, which has one of the best sports departments in journalism in Las Vegas. And there is an article posted late today. Adam Hill, sports writer Adam Hill, for the Review Journal, is covering this. And he writes this evening, the headline of the article is, "What Gives? Mega Fight and UNLV games scheduled on the same day at Allegiant Stadium." Farther in the article, he says the game remains on UNLV's schedule for September 13th as of late Wednesday, and university representatives did not return requests for comments or confirmation. He does note that Dana White has a pretty good relationship with UNLV. He has been a monetary supporter of their athletic department. However, he also notes that Dana White generally has been pretty open about being a critic of putting these kind of events in stadiums. He doesn't like it, largely because he thinks it takes away from the fan experience. He likes the more intimate atmosphere of indoor arena shows. So there's still a lot of question marks here. So you might want to follow Adam Hill at the Las Vegas Review Journal, and he is on X Twitter, which, it's still boxing Twitter, everybody. I believe he's at Adam Hill LVRJ, Las Vegas Review Journal, on Twitter. So I'm going to keep an eye on him to see what he finds out. But curious, just within the last few hours, still absolutely no confirmation from UNLV that they're moving.
And I think we're going to end things on that note. If you're checking this out on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you'll get notifications for any and all future episodes of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Going to go around the panel. We begin the show with ladies first. We always end the show with ladies first. Gail from nyfights.com. For those who want to talk all things boxing, let the folks know where they can find you.
It's easy enough. nyfights.com, nyfights.com. You'll find me on the social channels. I am on Blue Sky, and I am posting on Substack, which is starting to draw more interest. So if you would like to check out my latest interview, I had a chat with Hamza Shiraz this morning. It will be on my YouTube channel, which is Gail Falkenthal on Boxing.
The same Hamza Shiraz who's going to be fighting Edgar Berlanga later on this summer.
And had a few things to say about Mr. Berlanga, as you might imagine.
Indeed. I go to you, Daniel, from Forward Boxing News and the Inscriber Podcast, for those who want to talk all things boxing, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially
when it concerns the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks, you see it. You see the handle RAWKUZ99 on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Threads, on Spill. Like I said, I made sure to grab that name as fast as I could, and definitely catch you on there because it is an interesting time right now. Boxing it hasn't been as lively as we hoped it would be, but hopefully things pick up beginning of the year, and this incentive that TKO now has in trying to actually work in boxing is going to be an interesting thing to follow because remember, boxing has been one of the pet projects that Dana White has tried to get into and has spectacularly failed doing so as a lone operation through the UFC. Could this be this Canelo Crawford card a one and done for TKO when it comes to boxing?
We'll see. We'll see because he comes in at a time in a year where I don't know if I've seen boxing this kind of just in a long time. Because to your point, Daniel, yeah, it's to me is not much that's been memorable, quote unquote, this year. The sport needs to pick it up in the last half of the year. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter because once again I refuse to call it X, Brother JR at Brother JR76. You can also check me out on IG, Brother JRSC, on Blue Sky, Brother JR76, and on TikTok, Brother JR76. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Brian Norman, his world title defense against Sasaki. Um, in Tokyo. Again, that's happening just in a few short hours on ESPN Plus. Um, Also, we may talk about Vito Melanecki or that card of just or that card that's happening this weekend in Newark on ESPN Plus featuring Vito Melanecki um, in a 10-round bout. Jahid Tucker, Brandon Lee, also fighting on that card. Also, Gayal Lafai, excuse me, fighting Francisco Rodriguez Jr. for the an interim belt, WBC version at 112. And we will do a recap of what's going to be a pretty packed weekend of the 27th. Um, 27, 28, 29. Christian Mabili fighting Sasaki for an interim belt at 168. That's going to happen in Canada on ESPN Plus. Also on the 27th, the return of the aforementioned Deontay Wilder fighting Terrell Herndon. That's going to be in Wichita, Kansas, on pay per view. Um, and return of Zerdo Ramirez defending his unified cruiserweight belts against former champion Dorticos. Holly Holm makes her return to boxing on that card as well. An interesting bout, Gail and Daniel. Floyd Schofield fighting Tevin Farmer. And of course, Jake Paul, as I got to mention him, he's fighting Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Those fights are all going to happen on the 28th.
And
In
I
Anaheim.
will be there.
Yep, in Anaheim, California, on the Zone pay per view. So we will preview as many of those bouts as we can. So again, for Gail of nyfights.com, for Daniel for Boxing News and Ian Scriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 469 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. We will see you guys next time. Everyone, have a good evening. Good night.